You never know what waits in the dark until you turn on the light. That's how Jack Mercer always started his nights, whispering that line to no one but himself, as if to remind the shadows who they were dealing with. Cedar Ridge was quiet this time of year, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own thoughts too clearly. Out here, surrounded by pine trees and fog, Jack had built a small world for himself, a cabin with peeling paint, a patch of overgrown garden, and a radio older than most of the kids in town. He didn't need much, didn't want much. In the mornings, he trimmed weeds and fixed broken fences. By afternoon, he'd sit on the porch, a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand, watching the mist roll down from the mountains. And when the sun went down, he'd turn on that old military radio, the same one he used during his service, just to hear the static. Sometimes it picked up old channels, ghost signals, maybe even memories that refused to die. Rex, his German shepherd, would lie at his feet, loyal, silent, always alert. The dog had more scars than most men, Jack knew. Maybe that's why they understood each other. Both had seen too much. Both were still standing. Jack drank cheap whiskey from a chipped glass, not enough to forget, just enough to quiet the noise inside his head. He rarely talked, but when he did, it was usually to Rex. "Guess it's just you and me again, boy." Rex's tail would thump once, as if to agree. That night, the sky was bruised purple, heavy with rain that never came. The air carried that cold scent of pine and rust. Jack sat by the radio, clipping through dead channels. The static was constant, like breathing in white noise. Then, something changed. A faint voice cut through, distorted, broken, but human. "Help anyone, this is Oakridge, need assistance." Jack froze. The name hit him like a spark in dry grass. Oakridge Inn. Nobody had said that name in years. The old inn had been abandoned since the 90s, once a military rest stop, later shut down after rumors of experiments in classified operations. Locals stayed away. Kids dared each other to go near it. Jack never did. Not because he was afraid of ghosts, but because some ghosts wore familiar faces. He turned the radio dial, trying to lock onto the signal. It flicked again, a man's voice. Desperate this time. "Leave someone, Oakridge basement." Then silence, the kind of silence that presses against your chest. Rex lifted his head. Ears pricked. He growled low, deep in his throat. Jack leaned back in his chair. Logic told him to forget it. Some prank, maybe, or a looped recording from years ago. The rational part of his brain said, "Stay home. It's none of your business anymore." But that wasn't who Jack Mercer was. He'd tried living quietly. He'd tried being nobody, but sometimes the past doesn't knock, it just walks right in. He got up, joints stiff from years of service and solitude, and grabbed his old field jacket. The patches were faded, but the smell of gun oil and dust never left it. He slid open the drawer beside the radio. Inside was a small M9 pistol, the same sidearm he carried during deployment. He hadn't touched it in months, maybe years. He checked the magfully. Full. Rex stood up, tail low, eyes locked on his owner. "Not tonight, boy," Jack muttered. But Rex didn't listen. He never did when the air felt wrong. Jack sighed. "All right, grab your leash." Minutes later, the two of them stepped out into the mist. The cold hit hard, sharp, biting, almost electric. The forest around Cedar Ridge swallowed sound. Even their footsteps felt muted. Jack's old pickup truck sat under a coat of frost. He tossed the rifle case in the back, just in case, and started the engine. It coughed once before growling to life. The headlights cut through the fog like twin blades. Gravel crunched under the tires as he pulled onto the narrow road leading north toward Oak. The drive took less than 20 minutes, but it felt longer. The deeper he went, the thicker the fog became. Every bend in the road looked the same. Pines leaned over like sentinels. Watching, he thought about turning back once or twice. But that voice on the radio, the way it cracked, like someone on the edge of panic, kept echoing in his head. Oakridge Inn appeared out of the mist like a ghost. A two-story structure, half-rutted, its hanging by one rusty chain. The windows were black holes. The front door slightly open. Rex growled again. Jack turned off the engine. The only sound left, with the ticking of cooling metal and the slow, steady rhythm of his own breath. He grabbed the flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out. The beam cut a path through the fog, landing on muddy ground and footprints. Fresh ones. Jack crouched down, touched the soil, still wet. Someone had been here, recently. He felt that old instinct kick in, not fear, but focus, the kind you only get trained into. "Stay close," he whispered. Rex moved ahead, nose low, muscles tense. They reached the door. It creaked open wider as if inviting them in. Jack hesitated for half a second, then pushed it open fully. The air inside smelled of mildew, old wood, and something metallic. The flashlight swept across the lobby, torn curtains, broken furniture, a reception desk half collapsed, dust floated like slow-moving snowflakes. Then, a sound, footsteps, light, faint, coming from upstairs. Jack froze. He tightened his grip on the flashlight, the other hand resting instinctively on his gun. "Hello," he called out. His voice echoed, hollow, unanswered. Rex let out a low bark once. A shadow moved at the end of the hallway, just a flicker, but enough to send a current through Jack's chest. He swung the flashlight, nothing there. Silence again, the kind that carries weight. Jack exhaled slowly. "Looks like we're not alone." Boy, Rex's ears twitched, eyes fixed ahead. Somewhere deep in the building, a door closed, and for the first time in years, Jack Mercer felt something he thought he'd left behind on the battlefield, the pool of the unknown. The road to Oakridge wound through the woods like a scar through the earth. The deeper Jack drove, the thicker the fog became, a white wall swallowing the trees, the sky, even the sound of the engine. The old pickup rattled with every turn, headlights slicing through the mist in thin, shaky lines. Rex sat in the passenger seat, ears twitching, eyes locked forward. He didn't bark, didn't whine, but Jack could feel it, the tension in the dog's shoulders, the instinct that always knew trouble before he did. Jack gripped the wheel tighter. "Easy, boy. We're just checking it out. Probably nothing." He didn't believe that himself. The voice on the radio, that broken, desperate sound, still echoed in the back of his mind. He hadn't heard a distress call like that since Iraq, the kind that cut through everything: distance, reason, fear. And now, it had led him here, through the fog. The outline of Oakridge Inn finally took shape. It sat in the middle of a clearing, crooked and half-eaten by time. The sign out front hung by one chain, swinging in the wind. A few letters had fallen off, leaving only Ridge Inn. The rest lay rusted in the grass. Jack parked a few yards away and killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy, almost physical. Rex started to growl, low and deep. Jack looked at him. "You smell something." The dog didn't move, just stared at the building, his fur bristling slightly. Jack opened the door, stepped out into the cold. The night air hit him like ice water, sharp, biting, filled with the scent of wet pine and rust. He grabbed his flashlight and swept it across the ground. That's when he saw them. Footprints, fresh ones, pressed deep into the mud, too small for boots. Barefoot, he crouched down, tracing one with his gloved hand. The soil was still damp. Whoever had been here, it hadn't been long. A shiver ran up his spine, not from the cold. Behind him, Rex gave a soft whine. Stepping back, tail low, Jack frowned. "What's wrong, boy?" Rex's ears flattened. He took another step back, eyes fixed on the inn's dark windows. That was rare. The dog had faced gunfire, explosions, even wild animals never flinched. But now something about this place unsettled him. Jack followed his gaze to the front door. It was open, just a crack, swinging slightly with the wind. The beam of his flashlight cut across the doorway, landing on the old wooden frame and something else. A smear of mud, a handprint. Jack straightened, pulse quickening. "Stay," he told Rex quietly, but Rex ignored the command, letting out a low bark. Jack's instincts kicked in. He slipped the flashlight under his left arm, reached into his jacket, and pulled out the old M9 pistol. The weight of it felt familiar, too familiar. He hadn't drawn it in years, but the motion came back like muscle memory, smooth, natural. He checked the chain-back, loaded. He took a slow breath, eyes scanning the shadows. He wasn't law enforcement. He wasn't even supposed to have this weapon anymore. But habits like his never die. They just wait in the dark until you need them again. Jack moved closer to the door, boots sinking slightly into the mud. Every step echoed louder than he wanted. The creak of the floorboards inside carried out through the still night. He stopped just before the entrance, flashlight raised. "Hello." His voice came out steady, controlled. "Anyone here?" No answer, only the soft whistle of wind through broken glass. He pushed the door open with his shoulder. It swung wide, scraping against the floor. Inside, the lobby was worse than he remembered. Wallpaper peeling off in long strips, ceiling beams sagging, a chandelier lay shattered on the ground. The smell was a mix of rot, mildew, and something faintly metallic. Blood. Maybe old or new. He couldn't tell. He took another step inside. Rex stayed near the threshold, growling softly. The flashlight beam danced across the walls, catching fragments of old life, a framed photo of soldiers, a broken desk, a phone line dangling like a noose. Then something moved. A flicker just at the edge of the beam. A shadow, slipping past one of the doorways down the hole. Jack froze. Who's there? Nothing. Just the groan of wood and the sound of his own breathing. He aimed a flashlight down the hall, but the beam hit nothing but dust and darkness. Still, he could feel it. Someone was here, watching. His grip tightened on the M9. He stepped forward, silent, careful. Each board creaked under his boots. His light swept across torn wallpaper, faded pictures, and the faint shimmer of something wet on the floor, a trail leading deeper inside. He followed it. Halfway down the hall, the air changed colder, heavier, the kind of cold that doesn't belong indoors. He heard it again, movement, this time from the left, behind a doorway. Quick, light. Jack turned fast, gun raised. Show yourself. The beam hit the wall and a figure flashed into view. Small, human, there for a second, then gone. The door slammed shut. Rex barked, sharp and loud, breaking the silence. Jack's heart kicked hard in his chest. He moved to the door, pressed his back against the wall beside it, counting silently. 1, 2, 3. He swung in, gun first. The room was empty, a bed frame, broken, windows sealed shut with boards, a single chair in the corner, and dust. So much dust. Whoever or whatever he'd seen, it was gone. Jack lowered the gun slowly, exhaling through his nose. You're losing it, old man, but deep down he knew better. That wasn't imagination. There had been someone alive. He stepped back into the hallway. Rex was waiting, tail stiff, eyes wide. Yeah, Jack muttered, holstering the M9. I saw it too. The wind outside had stopped completely now. The air inside the inn felt sealed, like the building itself was holding its breath. He took one last look around before switching off the flashlight. For a second, total darkness swallowed him whole. Then he turned it back on, and just for that split second, before the light returned, he could have sworn he saw another face, watching him, from the upstairs landing. There's something about old buildings, they hold on to things, not just dust and rot, but memories. And sometimes those memories don't want to be found. Jack Mercer knew that feeling all too well. The beam of his flashlight swept through the second hallway of the Oakridge Inn. The air was thick with mold and something else, the stale scent of time. He moved carefully, the floorboards groaning under each step, while Rex followed close behind, ears sharp, tail low. Somewhere deeper inside, a drop of water hit metal. The sound echoed like a heartbeat. Jack aimed a light toward the reception counter. A pile of papers had turned to pulp from rain leaking through the roof. On the wall behind it, a crooked frame still hung, a black and white photo of soldiers standing in front of this very building. Jack stopped, his breath caught. He stepped closer, brushing off the dust. The photo was faded, water-stained, but he recognized the faces. Young men, uniforms, patches. One of them was him, Jack Mercer, 27 years old. Special Forces, standing front row, arms crossed, a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. The others, Carter, Briggs, Vega, Simmons, all gone now, and behind them, in that photo, Oakridge Inn didn't look abandoned. It looked alive. He swallowed hard, eyes narrowing. What the hell? Rex winced quietly. Jack tore the photo from the wall and slipped it into his pocket. Then he noticed something else beside it, an old corkboard covered in yellowed papers, half torn away, training schedules, maps. A few were stamped Confidential Oakridge Operations Unit. He ran his hand across one of the maps. Red pins still marked certain points, corridors, rooms, and below it, a section labeled Sub-Level Access. Basement, Jack muttered. He followed the layout on the paper, flashlight guiding him down a narrow hallway toward a locked metal door. The hinges were rusted, the handle stiff. He gave it one strong pull. It creaked open with a scream that echoed through the entire building. A staircase led down into the dark. Rex growled softly, refusing to move. Jack crouched beside him, rubbing the dog's neck. You wait here. But Rex only growled again, tail rigid, ready to follow. Jack sighed. Fine, but stay close. The steps moaned under their weight as they descended. The deeper they went, the colder it got. The light from above disappeared completely. Down here, there was no wind, no sound, just the hum of still air. At the bottom, the flashlight revealed a concrete hallway. Pipes lined the ceiling. The floor was damp, stained with something dark. Jack swept the beam across the walls, faded graffiti. Old military posters, a cracked clock frozen at 2:47. Then he saw the door at the end. It was slightly ajar. He pushed it open. Inside was a small room, part storage, part makeshift shelter. A metal table sat in the center, covered with empty food cans and a half-finished cup of coffee, still wet. The smell hit him first, stale but recent. Someone had been here, maybe still was. Jack's finger tightened on the flashlight. His other hand hovered near the pistol at his belt. He scanned the room, a sleeping bag in the corner, a military duffel, a lighter sitting next to an open notebook. He moved closer. The notebook pages were filled with scribbles, coordinates, short phrases, names, one name repeated over and over, Mercer. His stomach turned. He flipped through more pages until something slid out a photo. It was of a woman, smiling, holding a little girl. Jack's breath caught in his throat. His wife, his daughter. The photo was singed at the edges, just like the one he lost in the fire 10 years ago. He stared at it, frozen. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. That's when he saw the folder on the table. Old, brown, stamped with military markings. The cover read, Classified Personnel Dossier Mercer, J. For a second, his mind went blank. He reached out, hesitating, then flipped it open. Inside documents, reports, mission logs. Some pages were dated, others covered with stamps. Confidential, restricted access, property of U.S. Department of Defense. The first line of the file. Subject, Jack Mercer. Designation, Operative. Unit 7B, Psychological Warfare Division. Status, terminated, reinstated, classified. He frowned. He didn't remember any of that. More pages, records of interrogation programs, subject testing, emergency site containment, and a location Oakridge facility. His own name appeared again and again, each time linked to incidents he barely recalled. Explosions, missing personnel, destroyed data. His hands began to shake. He dropped the file back on the table. What is this? He muttered, voice trembling. What the hell is this? Rex barked once, loud, sharp. Jack spun around, gun raised. The hallway outside was empty, but he felt it. That prickling at the back of his neck, the same instinct that had kept him alive overseas. Someone was watching. He moved toward the doorway. Slow, controlled. The flashlight beam trembled slightly as he swept it left to right. Nothing. Then a faint sound like breathing. Not his. He froze, listening. A floorboard creaked above them. Then another. Someone was in the building. Jack whispered, "We're leaving." He grabbed the file, the photo, and the notebook, stuffing them into his jacket. He switched off the flashlight and let his eyes adjust to the dark. Years of training took over silence. Steady breath moved with the shadows. As they climbed back up the stairs, he could hear the faint rhythm of footsteps somewhere on the first floor, slow, deliberate, matching his own pace. When he reached the top, he stopped just beneath the broken ceiling light. The footsteps stopped too. For a long moment there was nothing. Then a whisper, soft, faint, coming from down the hall. Jackie turned sharply, flashlight on, gun raised. The beam landed on nothing but dust. Rex barked once more, spinning in circles. Hackles up. Jack's pulse hammered in his chest. He scanned the lobby again, the broken windows, the fallen chairs, the silent photo wall. No one there, but something had changed. The photo he'd taken earlier, the one with his old unit, was now gone from his pocket. He looked around the floor, checked his jacket. Nothing. Gone. Jack stood there in the center of the lobby, surrounded by echoes of his past, the faint smell of coffee still lingering from someone else's peasants. His reflection flickered in the cracked glass behind the counter. For a split second he thought he saw another face staring back, younger, harder, wearing the same uniform he once did. Then it vanished. Rex pressed against his leg, trembling slightly. Jack looked down at the dog, then back toward the dark hallway. Something inside him whispered not words, but a knowing. Oakridge wasn't just a place. It was his story, written in secrets and blood. And somewhere in that building, the past was still alive, watching, waiting. The air inside Oakridge Inn had gone still, heavy, like the whole place was holding its breath. Jack stood in the middle of the main hall, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The beam cut through the dust and shadows, sweeping over broken furniture, shattered glass, and the outlines of a life long gone. Somewhere behind the walls, the wind moaned, carrying whispers that didn't sound entirely natural. Rex let out a low growl, a warning. Jack froze. Then, from the far end of the corridor, a faint shuffle, footsteps. He swung the flashlight toward the sound. Who's there? His voice was calm but cold, honed by years of command. Show yourself. No answer, only the soft drip of water somewhere in the dark. Then, from behind a cracked doorway, a figure stepped forward slowly, hands trembling. The man looked like a ghost dragged out of a war zone. Gray hair, unshaven face, eyes sunned and deep. His jacket was torn, stained with dirt and something darker. In his shaking hand a pistol. Rex barked sharply, teeth bent. The man's voice cracked the silence like a match. So you came back to Mercer? Jack blinked. That voice, rough, weathered, familiar, but impossible. Who the hell are you? Jack demanded. The man raised the gun higher, his breathing uneven. You don't remember me, do you? He smiled, a bitter, broken thing. Figures, they always make us forget. The tension snapped. Jack ducked left as the gun flashed. A bullet hit the wall behind him, sending splinters across the floor. Rex lunged forward, a blur of fur and muscle, slamming into the man's arm. The pistol clattered away, echoing through the empty hall. Jack moved fast, training taking over. He pinned the man against the wall, forearm pressing into his chest. The stranger gasped, fighting for breath. "Drop it," Jack barked, even though the gun was already gone. "Who sent you?" The man coughed blood at the corner of his mouth, but his eyes never wavered. Still the soldier always following orders. Jack eased off slightly, just enough to let him breathe. "Talk." The stranger's voice dropped, rasping, haunted. "They told me you died in Fallujah, that Mercer didn't make it back, but I knew that was a lie. They needed someone to bury the truth." Jack stepped back, studying him more closely now. The scar across the jaw, the small tattoo on the wrist, a mark from their old unit. Cole. The name slipped out before Jack could stop it. The man looked up for the first time. A flicker of recognition or maybe pain passed over his face. Yeah, Cole Briggs. What's left of him? Anyway, Jack's pulse thudded. He hadn't heard that name in over 20 years. Cole Briggs, the radio operator in their team, were officially killed in action during a raid that went wrong. They'd found pieces of his gear, a helmet but not the body. Jack lowered his weapon slightly. "You're supposed to be dead." Cole gave a hollow laugh. "Yeah, I've heard that one before." Rex, still tense, stood between them, growling low but waiting for Jack's signal. "What the hell are you doing here, Cole?" Jack asked. "Why come back to this place?" Cole looked around, his gaze darting toward the shadows like he expected them to move. "You think Oakridge was just a base?" "No, Jack, it was a lab. They tested things here on us, on the ones who came back broken." Jack shook his head. "You're talking nonsense." Cole's expression hardened. "Am I?" "You found the file, didn't you? The one with your name. Mercer, J. Classified. You think that was some old paperwork?" He leaned closer, eyes wild. "They didn't stop the experiments when the war ended. They buried them under this floor." Jack wanted to dismiss it, chalk it up to paranoia, trauma, but something in Cole's tone, the raw certainty, made it impossible to ignore. "Who's they?" Jack asked quietly. Cole's eyes flicked toward the stairway leading down to the basement. "You already know. You've felt it since you got here." The eyes watching, the static on the radio. "They never left, Jack. They're still here." The wind howled through a broken window, carrying the faint hum of distant machinery, or maybe it was just his mind playing tricks. Jack exhaled slowly. "You need help, Cole. You're not well." Cole stepped back, shaking his head violently. "No, you're the one who doesn't get it. You've left us behind. You moved on, but some of us never got out of the dark." He pointed toward the floor. "They built the dock right underneath us." For a moment, the two men stood in silence, two soldiers long past their wars, now facing something neither could fully name. Then, from the radio clipped to Jack's belt, a burst of static, a voice, faint but distinct, came through. "Unit 7 returned to base, returned to Oakridge." Jack froze. That voice, he hadn't heard it in decades. It was his old commanding officer, a man who'd been dead since 2003. Cole smiled grimly. "Told you." Rex barked again, this time backing toward the door. Uneasy, the air had changed heavier, colder. Jack could almost feel something humming under the floorboards. Cole bent down slowly, picked up his fallen gun, and turned away. "You'll see soon enough," he said, almost softly. "You'll come back here eventually." Before Jack could stop him, Cole slipped into the corridor and vanished into the dark, footsteps fading into nothing. Jack stood there, motionless, listening. Only the creak of the old building answered him. He turned off his flashlight and looked out the broken window. The mist outside had thickened, swallowing the road and the trees beyond. Somewhere out there, Cole Briggs was wandering, a man who should have been dead, muttering about ghosts from a war that refused to end. Jack ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of everything pressing down again. He whispered, almost to himself, "You never really leave the battlefield, do you?" Rex whimpered softly beside him. Jack knelt, giving the dog's fur a gentle pat. "Let's go home, boy." But as he said it, he knew it wasn't over. Oakridge still had secrets buried in its walls, and somehow, they all pointed back to him. The night stretched long over Cedar Ridge. Fog clung to the mountain road like something alive, swallowing the trees and wrapping around the truck as Jack drove back toward town. The headlights cut a narrow path through the mist, and Rex sat quietly in the passenger seat, ears twitching every time a branch scraped the window. But Jack wasn't heading home, not yet. Cole Briggs was in the back seat, hands zip-tied, eyes fixed on the floor. He hadn't said a word since Jack found him wandering near the old access road behind Oakridge. He looked exhausted not just physically, but hollowed out, like something inside him had already died a long time ago. Jack's voice broke the silence. "You're gonna start talking now, Cole." Cole smirked, dry and broken. "You think this is an interrogation, Mercer? You still play soldier even when there's no war left?" Jack kept his eyes on the road. "You showed up at a government property with a weapon and started shooting. You owe me some answers." Cole laughed, low and bitter. "Answers? That's funny. That's what they said the night they locked us in." Jack's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He didn't respond. They reached an old cabin on the edge of town, Jack's place. Small, isolated, tucked between the woods and a narrow river that caught no light at night. He parked the truck, motioned for Cole to get out. Rex followed, hackles slightly raised. Inside, the cabin was warm, dimly lit by a single oil lamp on the table. Jack cut the zip tie from Cole's wrists but kept his gun close. "Sit," he said. Cole obeyed, slumping into the chair, rubbing his wrists. His eyes wandered over the room, the old military photos, the folded flag on the shelf, the bottle of cheap whiskey beside the radio. He gave a faint, tired smile. "You still drink that garbage." Jack poured 2 glasses anyway and slid one across the table. "Start from the beginning." Cole stayed at the glass, then took a sip before he spoke. "You remember the last mission, don't you? The one they scrubbed from the records." Jack said nothing. He wasn't sure he did remember. Just flashes, noise, smoke screens. "They said we were sent to secure evidence," Cole continued. "Something they'd been testing overseas, a neuro compound, supposed to enhance alertness, reflexes, make us better in combat. But it didn't work the way they planned." Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" Cole leaned forward, his eyes glinting in the lamplight. "It made us see things, Jack. Things that weren't there. Or maybe they were. I stopped being able to tell the difference." Jack remembered now the nights when the whole squad would stare into the dark, weapons raised at sounds that didn't exist, the static in the radios, the whispers that came from nowhere. Cole's voice trembled. "They called it Project Echo. Oakridge was one of the testing sites. You and I, we were both part of it." Jack's throat felt dry. "That's not possible. I'd remember." Cole slammed his fist on the table. "No, you don't remember because they made sure of that. You think those blackouts during the briefings were nothing. You think your wife's death was an accident." Jack stood up abruptly, chair scraping the floor. "Careful, Cole." Cole met his eyes. "You ever wonder why the fire started in the first place? Why you were the only one not home that night?" Jack froze. His mind flashed back smoke, heat, the sound of a woman's scream, his wife's face framed by fire, and then nothing, just a blinding white light. He'd always assumed it was trauma that blocked the memory. But now, Cole continued, quieter now. "We were told to burn everything, destroy the files, erase the evidence, but something went wrong. Someone wanted to make sure none of us could talk. They followed us home. Jack. You, me, the others." Jack's voice was barely a whisper. "You're saying they killed my family." Cole's hands shook. "Not them directly, but their orders started the chain. The experiment wasn't over, it just changed shape. They used us as proof. Collateral damage." Rex winced softly, sensing the tension thickening in the air. Jack turned toward the window, staring into the fog pressing against the glass. He could almost see movement in it, faint outlines shifting, like the ghosts of his past trying to get in. He spoke slowly. "So why come back now? Why Oakridge again?" Cole exhaled, the sound almost a sob. "Because they're still running it, Jack. Different name, different front. There's something under that building. I saw it when I escaped." "Escaped from where?" Cole looked up, eyes full of a fear Jack hadn't seen since Iraq. "They called it Section 9, a basement beneath Oak. They said it was sealed, but it's not. It's alive down there." Jack's heartbeat picked up. "Alive?" Cole nodded. "You don't understand. It's not a place, it's the residue. The experiment never stopped. It learned to feed off what we left behind. The fear, the guilt, the memories. That's why we're drawn back here, where it's leftovers." The room fell into silence. The radio on the shelf suddenly crackled to life, the same faint static from before. Then, a voice, warped and distant. "Mercer, report to base, report to Oakridge." Jack's stomach turned cold. It was the same voice from the night before, his old commanding officer, the one who'd been dead for decades. Cole whispered, "You hear it too, don't you?" Jack didn't answer. He picked up the radio slowly, turned the knob, but the voice only grew clearer. "Unit 7, Operation Echo continues. Return to Oakridge." Then silence. Cole started laughing, unhinged and bitter. "You can't run from it, Jack. It wants us back." Jack's hand shook slightly as he set the radio down. His reflection in the window looked like a stranger, older, emptier. For years he'd told himself that his isolation was peace, but maybe it was just the quiet before something darker. He turned back to Cole. "If what you're saying is true, we need proofs, something we can bring to someone higher." Cole shook his head. "There is no higher. Jack Oakridge is the top. The government abandoned it in name only. The real people behind it, they've been underground since day one." Jack exhaled, trying to steady his thoughts. "Then we go back. We find what's buried." Cole stared at him, disbelief in his eyes. "You think you can just walk back in and fix this?" Jack's expression hardened, the same cold steel that once led men through fire. "I'm not trying to fix it," he said quietly. "I'm trying to finish it." For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the wall clock and Rex's slow breathing. Finally, Cole nodded, resigned. "Then we go together." Jack poured another glass of whiskey, downed it in one shot, and glanced toward the door, toward the darkness that waited beyond. "You were right about one thing," he said, his voice low. "You never really leave the battlefield." Rex stood, teal stiff, as if he already sensed where this was going. Jack grabbed his jacket, the old military one with the faded insignia, and slung his rifle over his shoulder. Outside, the fog had thickened again, curling around the porch like smoke from a fire long past. As they stepped out into the night, Cole muttered under his breath, almost a prayer or maybe a warning. "Sometimes the truth isn't buried, Jack, it's waiting to be found, and somewhere deep inside the woods." Beyond the fog and the ruin of Oakridge Inn, something seemed to stir, like it had been listening all along. The road back to Oakridge was quieter than before, too quiet. The fog hung low, thick like a curtain that refused to lift. Jack Mercer gripped the wheel, headlights slicing through the mist, the faint outline of the old and just barely visible up ahead. Cole sat beside him, jittery, eyes darting toward the dark tree line as if something was following them. Rex paced in the truck bed, restless, ears perked toward the woods. Nobody spoke. The silence felt like a living thing, pressing against the glass. When they finally pulled up in front of the building, Oakridge Inn looked even worse than before. Windows shattered, doors half open, vines crawling up the walls like veins. The air smelled of damp rot and old dust. "Jack, shut off the engine. You sure about this?" Cole asked, voice trembling slightly. Jack didn't answer. He just checked his M9, chambered around, and stepped out, the cold bit at his hands. The crunch of gravel beneath his boots echoed too loudly. They moved inside together, slow, careful, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Oakridge had been an inn once, decades ago, before it was turned into a government outpost, before it became whatever it was now. The lobby was a graveyard of broken furniture and fallen ceiling tiles. Jack's flashlight caught the faded letters on a cracked sign behind the counter. "Welcome to Oakridge." Cole's voice came low. "It was in the basement. That's where they kept the data." Jack nodded. He remembered the stairwell from years back, the same one where he'd once carried crates of supplies down during the last mission. He hadn't been back since. As they approached it, Rex started growling softly. His body went stiff, eyes fixed on the darkness below. Then came the sound, faint but unmistakable. Footsteps, not theirs. Cole froze. "You hear that?" Jack raised a hand for silence. The footsteps were slow, dragging, like someone walking barefoot on wet concrete. They echoed faintly up the stairwell, then stopped. Jack whispered, "We're not alone." He took the lead, pistol drawn, flashlight steady. Cole followed close, shotgun trembling slightly in his grip. Rex crept beside them, hackles raised, a low rumble deep in his chest. The stairs went down farther than Jack remembered, step after step, the smell of mildew growing thicker, the air heavier. The beam of his flashlight flickered as if something interfered with it. When they reached the bottom, they found a steel door, rusted but still intact. Across it, faint stenciled letters read, "Section 9, authorized personnel only." Cole's breath quickened. "This is it." Jack tried the handle, locked. He turned to Cole. "Give me your knife." A few minutes later, the latch gave way with a metallic snap. The door creaked open, releasing a stale gust of air that smelled of oil and decay. Inside was a large concrete chamber, walls lined with old filing cabinets, shelves of metal cases, and shattered computer terminals. In the corner, a projector sat half buried under dust. Jack's flashlight landed on a metal table. On it, folders stamped "Classified Project Echo." Cole exhaled shakily. "God, it's all still here." They moved closer, scanning the contents. Photographs of soldiers with electrodes on their heads. Reports describing behavioral conditioning under induced stress. Charts tracking neural adaptation response. Jack's stomach turned as he flipped through one file labeled Mercer. J, his own name, the report read. Subject displayed strong resistance to psychological triggers. Escalation recommended. Further testing approved. He felt cold all over. Cole's flashlight hit a stack of dusty tapes labeled Test Footage Group 7. The old projector beside it still had a reel loaded. Without a word, Jack turned it on. The machine sputtered, coughed, then began to hum. A beam of flickering light hit the wall. At first it was just static, then an image appeared. A room much like the one they were in now. Metal chair, chains, a man strapped down, face covered in blood, and another man standing over him barking questions, striking him, demanding answers. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The man in the film looked younger, but unmistakable. It was him. The voice on the tape echoed through the basement. "Tell me the code, or you don't leave this room alive." Jack stumbled back, flashlight shaking in his hand. "No, that's not possible." Cole watched in silence, face pale. "You remember now, don't you?" Jack shook his head violently. "No, I would never," but the film kept rolling. The younger Jack screaming orders, slamming a fist into the prisoner's face. The image stuttered, flickered, and for a split second, the prisoner's face changed. It wasn't a soldier anymore. It was Jack's wife. He blinked and she was gone again. Just static. Jack staggered backward until he hit the wall. "It's not real," he whispered. "It's not real." Cole stepped closer. "That's what they wanted us to believe. That none of it was real. But it was." The projector suddenly shut off with a loud click. The basement went dark, total blackness. Then the footsteps again. Slow. Closer this time. Coming from somewhere inside the room. Rex barked sharply, lunging toward the sound. But something hissed from the shadows of metallic scraping, like a chair being dragged across the floor. Jack switched his flashlight back on and froze. The projector screen was blank now, but words were scratched into the surface in jagged lines. "Remember what you did." Cole backed away, shaking. "We need to get out of here." But Jack couldn't move. His body felt heavy, his head pounding. Flashes of memory came and went. Gunfire, screams, fire, the smell of gasoline, his wife's voice calling his name, and over it all another voice, low and commanding, from some long-forgotten briefing room. "You are the weapon. Mercer, you don't remember, so you can live with what you've done." He dropped to his knees, gripping his head, trying to breathe. Cole crouched beside him. "Jack, listen to me. They broke us, all of us. But it's not over yet. We can still end it." Jack looked up at him, eyes wild. "Ended? It never ends. It just waits." Above them, the sound of footsteps grew louder, more of them this time. Multiple people, or maybe just echoes of the past. Cole lifted his shotgun. "They're coming?" Jack pushed himself up, forcing his mind to focus, to stay in the present. "No, not they. It's the place. Oakridge doesn't want us to leave." The lights flickered back to life, weak, sputtering. For a moment, Jack could see their reflections in the broken glass on the wall, his face pale. Drawn in behind him, something else, a shadow, standing too close, watching. Then the bulbs burst, and everything went black again. In the darkness, Cole's voice came out strained, trembling. "Jack, I think we just found what's been waiting down here." Rex growled deep, ready to fight. Jack steadied his breathing, raised his weapon, and whispered, "Then let's finish what we started." The night at Oakridge didn't end, it only sank deeper. Jack Mercer sat on the cold concrete floor of the basement, his flashlight lying beside him, the beam flickering across broken walls and forgotten files. The air was thick with dust and something else, something unseen but alive. Cole stood a few feet away, pacing, muttering under his breath. Rex lay close to Jack, breathing hard, a streak of blood visible across his shoulder where debris had grazed him. For the first time in years, Jack felt nothing steady, no discipline, no control, just the steady pull of something dark and familiar, rising from somewhere deep inside his chest. The memories came slowly at first in fragments. A house, a woman's laugh, the sound of rain on the roof, then smoke. He remembered coming home late that night, after a call from one of his old handlers. They'd said there was a leak, someone had stolen classified material from Oakridge. He'd been told to retrieve it quietly. When he got there, the house smelled of gasoline. He remembered shouting his wife's name. The baby's room was upstairs. Then, a noise behind him, the sound of a match striking, a flash of light, an explosion, heat, screams, and then nothing but white noise. Jack's hands trembled now, his breath coming short. "No," he whispered, "that wasn't me. That wasn't." Cole turned sharply. "You remember now, don't you?" Jack looked up at him, eyes wide. "You said they did it. You said they killed them." Cole hesitated, then spoke slowly, carefully. They gave the order. But you carried it out. Jack, you were still under Echo Protocol. You didn't know it was your house until it was too late. Jack shook his head violently. No, I would never, but deep down, part of him already knew. The training, the conditioning, the blackouts, all of it. He'd been programmed to destroy evidence. And that night, his wife had found the documents. She'd tried to protect him by hiding them. He'd followed the protocol anyway. He could still see her face in the firelight, the way her lips moved not in fear, but in forgiveness. Jack felt his chest cave in. His whole life, the isolation, the guilt, the drinking, the nightmares, it all came from the truth he'd buried. Rex whimpered softly, pressing against his leg. Jack reached down, fingers brushing the dog's fur, now wet with blood. Easy, boy, he whispered. You did good. The dog's eyes met his steady, loyal, forgiving. That simple look cut deeper than any accusation could. Cole watched from across the room, his face unreadable. Now you know why I came back here, he said quietly. To remind you some scenes don't stay buried. Jack rose unsteadily, leaning against the wall. You could have just left me out of it. Cole laughed dryly. Do you think I wanted to come back here? Oakridge doesn't let anyone go. It drags you back until you face what's left. He stepped closer, his voice low, almost a whisper. You think you're different from me, Jack. You're not. You did what we all did. You followed orders and called it duty. Jack's hands clenched. I didn't know, Cole snapped. That's the point. None of us did. They built the darkness into us, and we carried it home. The tension broke in an instant. Jack shoved him back. Cole swung. The two men crashed into the old projector, knocking it over. The bulb shattered. Sparks hissing in the dark. Rex barked and lunged, trying to protect Jack, and that's when it happened. A gunshot. Rex yelped and fell hard to the floor. Jack froze, staring at the dog's limp body. No, he dropped beside Rex, pressing his hands against the wound. The fur was warm and slick with blood. Rex whipped, then nuzzled weakly into Jack's hand as if to say it was okay, that he'd done his job. Jack's vision blurred. His throat tightened. He hadn't cried in 10 years, not once since the fire. But now, the tears came without warning. He buried his face into Rex's fur, shaking, the sound echoing in the empty basement. Cole stood nearby, silent, guilt flickering in his eyes. I didn't mean to. Jack didn't respond. He just kept whispering, over and over, like a prayer. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Minutes passed before he finally looked up. His face was streaked with tears, eyes hollow but calmer now, like the storm inside him had finally broken. Cole took a slow step back, voice rough. You finally see it, don't you? The darkness isn't this place. It's not Oakridge. It's you. It's us. Jack looked at him, not angry, not defensive, just tired, maybe. But I'm done letting it own me. Cole shook his head. You don't walk away from something like this. Mercer, you carry it. He started toward the door. I'm getting out of here before this place takes any more. Jack didn't stop him. He didn't even look up. Just stayed there beside Rex, running a trembling hand over the dog's fur, whispering to himself, maybe to Rex, maybe to the ghosts that surrounded them both. When Cole reached the stairs, he paused, turning back one last time. You can burn Oakridge to the ground if you want, he said softly. But the truth, Jack, the truth is in you, and that darkness, it's never really gone. Then he disappeared into the shadows, his footsteps fading away. Jack sat there for a long time. The silence pressed heavy on him. But it was a different kind of silence now, not the empty kind, but the honest kind, the kind that comes after the worst part has already happened. He looked down at Rex, still breathing weakly. You're gonna make it, he whispered. You have to. The radio crackled faintly nearby, that same static whisper again. Mercer mission incomplete. Jack turned it off. This mission, whatever it was, ended tonight. He gathered his strength, lifted Rex gently into his arms, and made his way up the stairs. The air grew colder as he climbed, the faint orange glow of dawn barely visible through the broken windows above. At the top, he stopped and looked back one last time at the basement, the darkness that had once defined him. Then he whispered, almost to himself, I remember now, and for the first time in years, that memory didn't destroy him, it freed him. But dawn came quietly, pale and cold, spreading across the ruins of Oakridge like a memory refusing to fade. Jack Mercer stood alone in the open hallway of the old inn, the morning light breaking through shattered windows, catching the dust that hung in the air like ghosts. Rex lay beside him, weak but alive, his breathing shallow. Jack had patched the wound as best he could. The dog's tail moved faintly when Jack looked down, and for a moment, that small gesture was enough to keep him standing. The silence in Oakridge was thick, the kind that comes after confession, after the last truth is finally surfaced. Jack's eyes wandered across the scorched walls, the fallen debris, the empty frames that once held government insignias, everything here, the lies, the orders, the experiments, it all led back to this place. Oakridge wasn't just a building, it was a monument to everything he'd done wrong, and he knew what had to happen next. He found the old fuel drums near the generator room, the same ones they'd used years ago to clean up evidence after each classified mission. He carried them one by one, his joints aching, the weight of every step sinking into his bones. Rex followed slowly, limping, never more than a few feet away. As Jack poured the fuel, the smell filled the air shop. Chemical heavy. It clung to his hands, his clothes, his memories. Each splash against the wood echoed like a heartbeat in the dark. He worked quietly, methodically, just like in the old days. But this time, he wasn't following orders, he was ending them. When the last drum was empty, Jack stood in the middle of the main hall. His reflection shimmered faintly in the cracked mirror ahead, an old soldier, hair graying, eyes hollowed by time. He almost didn't recognize himself. The radio on the table crackled to life, sudden and harsh. "Mercer comin', Mercer." Jack froze. The voice was faint, distorted, but unmistakable, the same tone that had haunted his nights for years. He stepped closer, leaning over the device. "Who is this?" A long pause. Then, "Mercer, remember, the mission isn't over." Static swallowed the rest. Jack stared at the radio, his fingers trembling. Those words, he'd heard them before. The night his house burned, the night he lost everything. He picked up the radio, staring at it as if it might give him answers. "The mission is over," he said quietly. "It ends here." He turned the knob until the static died. Then he placed it gently back on the table, next to his lighter. The lighter was old military issue, scratched and worn, but still worked like new. He turned it over in his hand, tracing the engraved letters, JM. For a moment, he just stared at the small piece of metal. So much had started with fire. Maybe it would end with fire, too. He crouched beside Rex, scratching gently behind the dog's ear. "You ready, buddy?" Rex looked up, eyes cloudy but loyal as ever. Jack smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both pain and peace. "Let's finish this." He flicked the lighter open. The flame danced, small, fragile, almost innocent. For a second he hesitated. Then he touched it to the nearest soaked beam. The fire took immediately. It hissed, then roared, climbing up the wood like it had been waiting years to breathe again. Within minutes, the blaze spread through the hallways, devouring the walls, the ceilings, the secrets. Jack stood in the center of it all, watching the flames crawl higher, the light flickering across his face, a face carved by regret, by guilt, by decades of silence. Smoke filled the air, swirling around him in gray spirals. He coughed but didn't move. The heat rose fast, waves of orange light painting everything in motion. For a moment, it looked almost beautiful, like redemption could burn. He thought of his wife, of their little girl, of the lops if he could still hear if he tried hard enough. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the fire. For everything, the ceiling groaned above him. Wood cracked, glass shattered, the structure giving in to its own weight. The fire no longer sounded like destruction, it sounded like release. Rex barked sharply, pulling him back. "Go," Jack said hoarsely. "Get out." But the dog didn't move. He tugged at Jack's sleeve instead, teeth gripping the fabric, pulling hard. The heat was unbearable now. Jack coughed again, stumbling as part of the roof collapsed behind him, sparks raining down like dying stars. "Rex," he shouted. The dog barked once more, tugging harder, dragging him toward the door. Jack stumbled, half running, half carried by instinct and the will of the only living thing still trying to save him. They burst through the front entrance just as the upper floor gave way. Jack fell to his knees outside, coughing violently, his lungs raw with smoke. Rex lay beside him, chest heaving. Behind them, Oakridge burned a roaring inferno against the pale morning sky. Flames tore through the roof, sending up columns of smoke that twisted into the clouds like ghosts escaping from purgatory. Jack watched it burn the place, the past, the pain, until all that was left was light. He sat there for a long time, the fire reflecting in his eyes. The radio inside crackled one last time, faint and broken. Mission complete. Jack closed his eyes. A tear traced the soot on his cheek. Rex rested his head on Jack's lap, tail thumping weakly once. Jack looked down and smiled. A quiet, tired smile, the kind that said everything was finally done. "Yeah," he murmured, "it's over." He watched the flames collapse inward, the building sinking into itself, wood turning to ash, light fading into gray. And as the last of Oakridge fell, the morning sun finally broke through the smoke, soft, golden, and clean. For the first time in years, Jack Mercer felt warmth that didn't burn. He stood, shoulders straight, eyes on the horizon. Rex followed behind him, limping but steady. Together, they walked away from Oakridge Inn, two survivors leaving behind the ghosts, the missions, the lies. The fire behind them hissed quietly as it died, and in that silence, Jack could almost hear her voice again, gentle, forgiving, carried by the wind. Come home. He didn't look back. The sun rose slow that morning, a pale, gentle light cutting through the mountain fog. It spilled over Cedar Ridge like a long exhale after a sleepless night. Where Oakridge Inn once stood, there was nothing left but smoke, silence, and ash. The great wooden beams had collapsed into blackened ribs. The fire was gone, but the ground still breathed heat. And in the middle of it all, sitting quietly amid the ruin, was Jack Mercer. He was covered in soot, his jacket torn, his face lined deeper than ever. His eyes, though, were calm. Beside him lay Rex, resting his head on Jack's boot, chest rising and falling faintly. The sound of sirens drifted closer, faint at first, then growing louder as the fire trucks came winding up the narrow mountain road. Tires crunched over gravel, doors slammed, voices shouted orders through the smoke. Jack didn't move. He just sat there, watching the light spread across the ridge. A young firefighter approached first, then stopped short when he saw the old man and the dog. Behind him, two police officers followed, their faces hidden behind masks. "Sir," one of them called out, voice muffled by the gear, "are you all right? We need to get you checked out." Jack turned his head slowly, the movement stiff. "I'm fine." His voice was low, roughened by smoke. The firefighter crouched, glancing at Rex. "Your dog's hurt. We can call the vet." Jack shook his head gently. "He'll make it. He's tougher than me." The young man nodded, unsure what to say next. Behind him, another voice, calm, authoritative, cut through the haze. "Named Sheriff Daniels," said a tall officer, stepping forward, removing his mask. His gray hair was damp with sweat, his uniform dark with ash. "You the one who set this place on fire?" Jack looked up at him, eyes steady. "Yeah." Daniels paused, studying him. "You want to tell me why?" Jack took a long breath. The morning air still smelled of burnt wood and fuel. He looked around the ruins, the broken foundation, the ghosts he'd finally laid to rest. "Because some things shouldn't be left standing," he said quietly. "Not when they were built on lies." The sheriff glanced around the scene, scorched walls, scattered papers, melted glass. He crouched beside Jack, his tone softer now. "You could have died in there." Jack's mouth curved slightly, not a smile exactly, more like the shadow of one. "Maybe I was supposed to." One of the younger officers, barely 30, approached cautiously. His face was clean, his uniform crisp, the kind of man who hadn't yet learned what ghosts felt like. "Sir," he said, hesitating, "if you don't mind me asking, why do all this? Why burn it down?" Jack looked at him for a long moment, really looked. The man reminded him of himself once, before the wars, before the weight. He reached down, brushing the ash from his hand. His voice came out steady, almost gentle. "So no one else has to live like I did." The words hung there, quiet and heavy, drifting into the smoke. The young officer said nothing. He just nodded, swallowing hard, then turned away. The paramedics came next, checking his pulse, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders, though he didn't seem to feel the cold. Rex whimpered softly, and Jack rested a hand on the dog's head. "You did good, boy," he whispered. "You got us out." Rex's eyes fluttered open briefly enough for Jack to see the loyalty still there. The same unbreakable light that had carried them both through too many nights. A medic crouched nearby. "We'll take him to the animal hospital in town. He'll get the best care." Jack nodded, voice barely above a breath. "You take care of him first. He earned it." They lifted Rex carefully onto a stretcher. The dog didn't resist. Jack watched until they disappeared behind the fire trucks. Then he exhaled a long, weary sigh that sounded like letting go. Hours passed. The chaos faded. The firefighters packed up their hoses. The police took notes, and the smoke began to thin. Jack remained there, staring at what was left of Oak. The air shimmered with heat, and from where he sat, the ground looked almost silver in the sunlight. Something caught the sheriff's eye among the ashes. He bent down, brushing away the soot. A small piece of metal glinted beneath the gray dust. He picked it up, a tarnished but intact military insignia, still shining faintly through the soot. "Looks like this belonged to you," Daniel said, handing it over. Jack took it in his palm. The insignia was warm, as if it still held a pulse. His thumb traced the familiar emblem, the one he'd worn through war, loss, and years of silence. He stared at it for a long while before closing his hand around it. "Guess it's all that's left," he murmured. Daniels looked at him, unsure whether to respond. In the distance, the first real sunlight broke through the clouds, cutting across the ridge in white, golden bands. Jack tilted his head up, squinting into it. The light reflected off the insignia, a small flicker of gold against the ash. When the officers finally led him toward the truck, Jack paused one last time. He looked back at Oakridge, the ruins, the smoke, the ghosts that no longer had a place to hide. The wind swept through the ridge, carrying a faint smell of pine and smoke together, something wild, something clean. Jack breathed it in. His shoulders straightened just slightly. As they passed the fire line, the young officer from before looked at him again. There was something like understanding in his eyes now. Jack nodded once, not goodbye, not regret, just acknowledgement. They drove down the winding road, leaving the smoldering ruins behind. From the back of the truck, Jack could see the sun cresting fully over the mountains, burning away the mist. Cedar Ridge glowed gold in the morning light. Rex was waiting for him in the ambulance ahead, and for the first time in years, Jack Mercer felt that maybe, just maybe, he was heading somewhere that wasn't haunted. The day stretched open before him, quiet, simple, and behind him, the ashes of Oakridge shimmered faintly, a grave for secrets, a cradle for redemption. As the trucks disappeared down the mountain road, the wind carried one last echo through the trees, low, steady, like a man's voice in prayer. Rest easy, soldier. The fires at Oakridge burned through the night. By morning, only smoke and silence remained. Jack Mercer left Cedar Ridge a week later. No ceremony, no goodbyes. Just a man, his old truck, and the steady sound of Rex's paws tapping against the seat. He drove north past the forests still heavy with fog, past the rivers that split and disappeared into the hills, the kind of roads where you could forget time if you wanted to. Jack wasn't running from something anymore. He was just done standing still. For years, his life had been made of ghosts, of missions half remembered, of voices on old radios, of faces that no longer spoke. But now, the silence didn't scare him. It felt like peace, or maybe the beginning of it. He found a small town called North Hollow. Nothing more than a few stores, a diner, and a veterinary shelter at the edge of the woods. The owner, a quiet woman named Marla, took him in without many questions. She just looked at Rex, saw the scars on both of them, and said, "You two look like you've been through hell. We can use the help." So Jack stayed. Days turned into weeks. He started fixing fences, cleaning kennels, learning how to patch up wounded dogs. Soon, Mala began letting him handle the training, working with police canines, helping them rebuild trust after trauma. It came naturally to him. Discipline, patience, quiet commands. The same language he once used to survive was now being used to heal. Some of the dogs were like him, jumpy at loud noises, restless at night, haunted by things that couldn't be seen. Jack understood. He didn't talk much, but they listened anyway. Rex was always near, limping a little now, but proud as ever. The townsfolk grew used to seeing the two of them walking along the dirt road at dawn, the old soldier and his shadow. Sometimes at night, Jack sat by the kennel yard, watching the stars fade over the northern tree line. He'd pour a small glass of whiskey, not to forget, just to remember softly. The radio still sat on his nightstand, the same one that had once pulled him back into darkness. Every so often a court stabbed whispers of stations long dead. He never turned it off. He just listened, letting the hum fill the room. Maybe he was waiting for another message. Maybe he was just making peace with the ones that already came. One evening, a young veteran stopped by the shelter, lost, sleepless, eyes full of the same distance Jack once carried. He was there for a therapy program. Jack showed him how to guide a rescue dog, how to breathe slower, how to stand still when the panic came. The kid looked at him after a while and asked quietly, "How do you live with it?" Jack didn't answer right away. He watched the sunset dip behind the trees, that kind of golden hour light that makes everything softer than it should be. Then he said, "You don't live with it. You live through it. Every damn day." The boy nodded, not understanding fully, but maybe enough for now. Seasons passed. Snow came and went. The days grew shorter, then long again. Jack found himself smiling more often, small, tired smiles, but real ones. Rex's muzzle turned gray. He slept more, chased fewer birds, but still wagged his tail when Jack came near. Some nights, the two of them sat outside under the dim porch light, saying nothing. They didn't need to, because some silence, Jack had learned, doesn't mean emptiness. It means the noise inside has finally quieted. One morning he took Rex for a walk up the northern ridge. The air was crisp, the sky clean. Below them, the shelter was a small shape surrounded by frost. Jack stood there for a long time, breathing in the cold, the quiet. the peace he'd spent half his life running from. He thought about Cedar Ridge, about the flames, the ghosts, the choices that never left, about his wife and son faces he could still almost see when the light hit just right. And then, without meaning to, he smiled, not because the pain was gone, but because it no longer ruled him. That night, the voiceover would say it like this: "It's not the darkness outside that breaks you, it's the one you carry within. But every time you choose to step into the light, it gets a little smaller." The next day, Marla found Jack sitting on the porch with Rex's head resting on his knee, both of them half asleep in the warm light of dusk. He looked older, but lighter, as if something had finally loosened its grip. When she asked if he'd ever go back south, Jack only shook his head. "No," he said, "there's nothing left down there that needs saving." Then he stood, grabbed Rex's leash, and looked toward the hills. The sun was setting again, that same orange fire cutting through the mist. They walked slowly, side by side, until their shapes blended into the fading light. Two survivors, one man and one dog, heading home the only way they ever knew how, forward.